How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to Monitor Comics, the channel where we create comics and manga. In today's video, we're going to be going over world building and how it relates to comics, manga, light novels, and even novels. Thank you PBGX for the video suggestion. Make sure you watch this video in its entirety because we'll be going over 10 key tips for world building. But first, let's hear a word from today's sponsor. This video is brought to you by Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of inspiring classes for creators. With Skillshare, you can explore new skills, deepen your creative passion, and get lost in creativity. Right now I'm taking a class called Illustrating with Ink, Techniques for Brush and Pen by the illustrator Roman Muradov. As a comic and manga artist, knowing how to ink professionally is essential. This class has taught me the fundamentals of traditional inking. I've even begun incorporating these new skills into my digital art. Thanks to Muradov, I've begun to combine ink pens and brushes to create more dynamic ink effects. I've also begun to be more intentional with ink splatter effects and cross-hatching styles. With the Skillshare Premium membership, you'll gain unlimited access to thousands of video lessons and class projects. Classes can range from illustration, animation, creative writing, freelancing, and much, much more. There are even some super cool comic and manga making tutorials that I'll definitely be checking out. Skillshare is an amazing place to fuel your curiosity. The best part is Skillshare has classes that fit any schedule and any skill level. In fact, most of the classes are under 60 minutes. Skillshare is curated specifically for learning, which means that there are no ads and they will always be launching new premium classes. Skillshare also has a very strong creative community that you can tap into for support, encouragement, and inspiration at any time. But wait, there's more because I have a special offer for you. The first 1,000 people to use this link will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare, so you can explore your creativity. Do something today that you couldn't do yesterday with short classes designed for real life. Thank you again, Skillshare, for sponsoring this video and continuing to help the creative community. And now, let's get back to the video. Let's first define what world building is. World building is the process of constructing an imaginary world. World building sets up where your story takes place. When you build a world, you include the landscape that your characters will inhabit, the tone of your story, its major preoccupations and themes, as well as the nature of its morality. Good world building shows your viewer what your characters see every day and the things that they notice about their environment. Great world building shows your viewer the things that your characters don't see, either because they take it for granted or because they've trained themselves not to notice something unpleasant. There are many things to think about when world building, such as setting, religion, currency, pastimes, communications, health, and government. Think about your actual life and how these concepts may affect your everyday life. By reflecting on the environment around you, you'll begin to see how complex society really is and why constructing a fictional world of your own can be so difficult. Let's start with tip number 1, establishing your world. The very first thing you should be thinking about when world building is your story's genre. Your story's genre will give you your first hint as to what kind of world will best fit your story. Are you creating a fantasy world? If so, maybe an elven forest is where your story should take place. Are you creating a dystopian world? Maybe a futuristic cyberpunk city is where your story should begin. Does your story take place on Earth or a planet similar to Earth? Figuring these things out early will help you figure out the mood of your world later. Let's take a look at Ichiro Oda's One Piece because it's probably the most famous manga for its immense world building. One Piece is an adventure series about pirates, so it's only fitting that the world is visually stimulating and unique. In One Piece, the sea is split into sections. The first section is the 4 normal seas that cover the 4 corners of the world, north, south, east, and west. Separating them vertically is the Red Line, a massive range of mountains that encircles the entire world. Going across the world horizontally is the Grand Line, a wild and unpredictable stretch of ocean divided into 2 halves by the Red Line, Paradise the first half and the New World. Surrounding both of these oceans are the Calm Belts, stretches of water where giant monsters live. It's important to note that each area has its own magnetic field, meaning that seasons and weather are completely different in every location in the story. One Piece begins in the East Blue, an ocean similar to what you would expect from real life. Since One Piece is an adventure story, the characters progress through the different seas and experience vastly different cultures and environments. Each individual island has its own culture, history, and livelihood. The desert kingdom of Alabasta is built around the importance of water and the dangers of traversing the plains of sand. In contrast, Water 7 is a Venice-like island where everyone gets around on canals and people make a living building ships. One way to keep track of your story's world is to think about all of this stuff early on. I've seen creators make maps of their story's world to easily see everything in front of them. By creating a map of your world, you'll easily be able to note what makes each different society unique. Let's move on to tip number 2, deciding where to start. Let's face it, the world is a big place with various different cultures, geography, politics, belief, and structures. The same can be said about the world in your comics and manga. One of the hardest decisions to make is choosing where to start your story in your world. Think of your starting location as a spawn point. Your starting setting should be interesting enough to make your reader interested in learning more about the rest of your world. Your starting setting should also function in a way that promotes expansion. What I mean by this is if you're writing an adventure series, there should be a good reason why your character decides to leave and travel the world. Another term for this focal point is the arena. Everything inside of the arena is important to the current story and everything outside of the arena is not. As your character progresses through their world, the arena will expand, making more locations important and past locations less important, at least for the time being. By thinking of your area of focus as an arena, your view of the world will narrow, allowing you to only focus on what really matters at this specific point in your story. In a slice of life story, your main city may be your only setting, so by expansion I'll be referring to what parts of the city are accessible to your characters and how do they function. A good way to decide on where your story should initially take place is to refer to your story notes. Ask yourself, what is the first dramatic event / inciting incident that will set your story's plot into motion? If you know what your first major plot point is, it may become easier to decide on a setting that makes sense for your story. Let's take a look at the manga series Attack on Titan. The setting is first described as a flattened land inhabited by giant titans. In this world, humanity lives inside of 3 large walls. Each wall separates different economic classes. Each wall has vastly different ways of living and geography. The starting location for the series is a tiny town in the outermost wall. By placing the main character here, it becomes easier to build upon the world. The characters are close enough to the outside world where the mountainous titans can penetrate the walls. This location also sets up for the rest of the series because it's far enough away from the innermost walls. As the story progresses and the characters are pushed back, the reader has time to learn about the different societies inside each wall. Transitioning to tip number 3, list out the rules and laws of your world. In real life, every society has a different set of rules and laws ranging from large scale to small scale. For your story, it's important to consider who is in charge of your world and what rules are put in place to keep balance. Do different cities in your story have different rules? What are the consequences for breaking the law? Do the rules of your story change over time? These are all great questions to ask yourself as your story progresses. Establishing boundaries will allow your fictional world to feel more believable. It can also create tension and conflict that can be later explored in your story. Think of a manga series like My Hero Academia. In that series, 80% of the world has supernatural abilities. To keep order, only those with superhero licenses are permitted to use their abilities to help keep peace. Anyone else who uses their power can be subject to fines or arrest. The society is set up in a way that promotes younger people to pursue a career in heroism. By establishing institutions dedicated to raising honorable heroes, the society is able to continue thriving. Of course, this has its downsides, as there are going to be people who disagree with the way powers are restricted. This leads to the rise of villains, the Liberation Army, and other vigilantes who want to change the way things are run. In your own story, it's important to consider the effects rules and regulations have on the characters in your story. Do they serve the greater good, or are they oppressive? Everyone agree with the laws, or should the rules be changed? Once you establish your story's government and politics, you'll have a better understanding of what is and isn't allowed in your story. This will also allow you to see the flaws in your story's society and decide where your character's allegiance lies. Moving on to tip number 4, describing the environment. Environment is a scientific term that encompasses all living and non-living things occurring naturally. Relating this to the world in your story, think about the weather of your setting and how it affects the society. Are there natural disasters or extreme temperatures? What natural resources exist in this location? How does the landscape look and how do people use it? While describing the environment may sound trivial, it can play a vital role in justifying how different civilizations in your story function. Think of an adventure manga like Made in Abyss. In Made in Abyss, the story takes place in the city built outside of a giant gaping abyss that stretches down into the depths of the earth. The abyss is full of ancient relics from the past as well as mysterious creatures. The characters in the story explore the different levels to solve the mysteries of the abyss. What Made in Abyss does well is differentiating each level of the abyss. Each level has different types of wildlife, creatures, and laws of physics. It's important to realize that good world building doesn't just mean drawing pretty exposition shots. Your world must provide both problems and solutions, and it's up to your protagonist to learn how to use the resources at their disposal. What Made in Abyss excels at is making a journey that is difficult but not impossible. Obviously, a story that is impossible wouldn't make for a good story. If the 2 main characters were eaten right away on the first level, the story would feel pointless. Similarly, if the characters easily descended to the bottommost layer, then the story would also lose its purpose. Your reader wants to see your characters adapt to the changing environments, so by creating situations that are achievable but difficult, you'll be on the path to creating an interesting world. Tip 5 is going to be defining the culture. What do the inhabitants of your story believe in? Is there religion or some sort of god? Are there sacred customs? What do your characters celebrate? How do these factors shape your character's point of view? What do your characters do in their everyday lives? By considering all of these questions, you'll breathe life into the characters that populate your story. You'll be giving them a meaningful existence. Think of a manga series like Higurashi When They Cry. In Higurashi, the story is set in a rural village that worships a vengeful god. Every year, 2 people from the village are sacrificed to appease the god's anger. This sets the series of events into motion. Higurashi creates a world based on reality, but mixes in religious elements that can justify the supernatural and horrific events that unfold throughout the story. By establishing your character's culture, you'll have a reference point for normalcy. As the events of your story begin to unfold, these beliefs may be challenged. Your character's entire world may be changed right before their eyes. By showing what your character's life was like before the events of your story's setting will begin to resemble a believable world. Tip number 6 is going to be defining the language. Think about how your characters communicate with one another. Are there taboo subjects that your characters try to avoid? Knowing what can and cannot be said in your world can be a great source for conflict. Differing languages and dialects can also indicate the diversity of your characters. An example of a series that uses language well is Avatar: The Last Airbender. In Book 2 Earth, the characters find themselves inside the walls of Ba Sing Se. Inside the walls, nobody knows about what is going on in the outside world. The government forbids anyone from mentioning the war with the Fire Nation, causing the population to be ignorant to their current situation. By making the subject of war taboo, the main characters are isolated from gaining the Earth Kingdom's support. The characters also find themselves targeted by the police for trying to leak information about the war inside of the walls. While language can seem like a trivial subject, language is what connects everyone to one another. We exchange information and express emotion through language. Taking some time to explore your world's language could enhance the legitimacy of your world. Moving on to tip number 7, identifying the history. Just like in real life, your world should have world history. Have there been wars in the past? Do the countries within your world have enemies? Has there been some supernatural event in the past that justifies the supernatural aspects of your world in the present? Is there a common antagonist that the entire world must come together to defeat? By providing backstory for your world, it can give an added dimension and make your world feel more tangible. Take some time to write out some rough ideas that could explain why your current world is the way it is. An example of a manga series with an extensive world history is Naruto. In Naruto, ninjas use a power source known as chakra to perform supernatural abilities. The source of chakra traces back to ancient times when a being from another world known as Kaguya consumed the chakra fruit from the god trees. Kaguya was meant to destroy the world after consuming the fruit, but grew fond of it and eventually passed on the ability to use chakra to others. After many millennia, the ability to use chakra has been passed down to nearly every individual. Different villages would eventually be founded with different politics and governing systems. It's important to note that you don't have to have your story's world history thought out completely right away. Naruto's ancient history wasn't revealed until the final arc of the main series. You can reveal information throughout your story as it becomes necessary. By keeping this in mind, you'll be able to think about how and why your world society functions the way that it does. You'll also be keeping in mind why certain characters act the way they do and what shapes their perception of the world. Jumping into tip number 8, the role of your characters. In any story, your character's development is going to be based on the socio-political factors you establish. Is your character wealthy or poor? Do the characters have jobs that they can be promoted at? Is the political system in your story oppressive? How do your characters deal with grief or loss? Is your character given the chance to fall in love? By considering all of these ways in which your character interacts with the world around them, you'll have an easier time determining important aspects of your story's world. Think of a manga series like Code Geass. In Code Geass, Lelouch is a banished prince from the oppressive empire that rules over a majority of the world. Lelouch's resentment towards his father's rule sets the events of the story into motion. After gaining the power of the Geass, he leads a revolution to defy his father's empire in the hopes of reforming Japan as an independent nation. If it weren't for the politics and oppressive rule established in the world of Code Geass, Lelouch never would have been driven to the point of declaring war on essentially the entire world. In your own story, consider how different elements in your character's society plays a role in your character's development. Socio-political factors can sometimes shape a person's entire identity. Tip number 9 is going to be finding inspiration. Like I always say, nothing is 100% original. Every idea has been done before and will continue to be done again and again. All that matters is your unique execution of pre-existing concepts and ideas. Don't be afraid to reference worlds created by some of your favorite authors. It's okay to use them as a template to further develop your own world. Examine how your favorite authors answer some of these world-building questions in their own works. By learning from the past, you'll have an easier time not making the same mistakes in the present. Finally, tip number 10, planning carefully. Building a detailed world for a story can be both stressful and exciting. It's very easy to get lost in the small details you want to include in your world. Focusing on too many aspects of your world will not only take time away from actually writing your story, but also limit your freedom to make changes later. It's better to not get hung up on minor things and remember your story will continuously change along the way. A good way to stay focused is to make rough notes of your overall world building and begin to fully flesh out specific settings when they are coming up soon in your comic or manga projects. That's going to wrap it up for this video. I hope you were able to get some value out of it. If you did, please like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Remember, you can support me on all of my social media accounts using the links in my description. I also stream on Twitch on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. I hope you can stop by and watch me create manga live. Leave a comment down below telling us about which anime or manga you think has the best world building. If you enjoyed this video, I hope you can check out some of my other ones after you're done watching this. We've already covered a ton of cool comic making tutorials such as choosing manga effects, sticking to one story idea, and even scripting out your manga. My original manga series Change the World will be debuting in Saturday AM's new mobile app very soon, so keep an eye out for that. Thank you again Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Make sure you claim your 1 month free trial. As always, keep creating everyone. I'll see you all in the next one.